Hello, our friends, Evolutionary Energy Arts family.
Welcome back, and look what we found.
Yes, and really gotta thank you guys for keeping all this together for us, giving us new ideas and things to go on. So yeah, the ARKSTORM, the ARKSTORM. Do you know that the powers that be are preparing for what they're calling the ARKSTORM?
Well, I know now. I didn't know before, but now I understand, and this wasn't too long ago.
And by the powers that be, we mean the USGS, NOAA, etc. And you see the West Coast storm scenario of an ARKSTORM. This is something that might surprise some of you. Many of you might know the history of this, but let's just tell you that the Great California Flood of 1862 is nothing to laugh at.
Yeah, and it wasn't widely advertised. We had to look this up.
As we've been talking about, our history is covered over in many cases, or there's certain aspects of it that get ignored, not really covered in the history books or even, when you're studying earth science. So beginning on December 24th, Christmas Eve, 1861. Wow. 1861, Civil War was underway. It rained for almost 4 weeks. 4 weeks straight, creating an inland sea in Orange County, lasting about 3 weeks, with water standing 4 feet deep up to 4 miles from the river. The worst flood since Sacramento's founding prompts residents to raise the downtown area up to 15 feet between 1862 and 1869. The tunnels under present-day Sacramento are remainders of the original downtown buildings and streets. Oh, we were just talking about mud flooding on the first video today. And this led to another thought of that. And cities built upon cities, buildings half under mud. Fascinating subject.
I know, and one would think with the magnitude of this, it would be more widely known, or at least compared to a lot of the floods that are going on today, but it's not.
California, the gold rush and everything that brought so many people into the area. And, California, when, people got to the area, people were blown away by the weather and the beauty, the natural beauty. California is, without question, one of the most beautiful places in the United States, albeit geopolitical and taxing and all that. It's led to people finally starting to leave more than people are going. I don't think it's because of the threat of earthquakes, really. I think it's more geopolitical, and just the cost of living is why people are going. But, earthquakes abundant in California, obviously. California and Nevada don't fare too well in many of the earth change maps we're talking about. But the flood aspect is, I think, something that most people are not aware of.
Right. And I just think that this is something, to me, it feels like it's a little sneaky. Like, this should be more known. This should be more understood because, look at the weather lately. It's insane.
It is. So the Great Flood of 1861, 1862, the cataclysm cut off telegraph communication with the East Coast, so people were isolated. As we look at Sacramento of the day, and boy, how reminiscent is it of people, using boats again to get from one place to another down Main Street. I've started talking about that almost 4 years ago now, with the floods that have been raging.
Right. And it's getting worse and worse and worse. So it makes one wonder, how far away from something like this are we really?
It submerged the entire Central Valley under as much as 15 feet of water. The entire Central Valley, right? In modern day California, a region that is just beautiful overall. And also where we've had wildfires. So, we've been thinking more about the wildfires than the flooding prospects. And, by the way, those have burned millions of acres of land, which adds to the flooding problems because then you don't have the trees to anchor the soil. And it creates a lot more, it could definitely create more of a mud flood effect if this happens again.
Oh, most definitely. This is really intense.
It is. It's amazing to see the photographs of what happened. Think about Sacramento. In Sacramento today, there's like 2.5 million people in the greater Sacramento area. Can you imagine 2.5 million people having to get up and move?
Nope. Mm-mm.
Yeah, it's incredible. It would be potential here is worse than some scenarios for the big one.
Yeah, it is. I mean, imagine that. That's like, look at all these people in boats just right down the middle of the road.
And here you see the inundation over here, and you see the San Fernando Valley. It's a lake. San Gabriel Valley, it's a lake. So much of this area was underwater, guys. 1861 to 1862. Whew. Can you imagine that? Can you imagine? And we're seeing the conditions go into effect because this was basically what you call a pineapple express. This is that atmospheric river that created this. And we've been talking about that happening. Now, you remember?
Oh, definitely. We have been talking about that happening, and here's evidence that it wasn't very long ago.
No, so, this is about 160 years ago. Just massive inundation. And if this happened again today, see, look at this. So you can see the water depth, 10 to 20 feet in the darker blue, and then 3 to 10 feet and less than 3 feet, but still standing water for long periods of time. This would lead to mass migrations that we haven't seen in our modern times.
Oh, most definitely. And a lot of difficulty, a lot of pain, a lot of sorrow, so much loss.
It is too. And one of the things I want to bring into effect, and I've talked about it for you guys that followed me back to the beginning, there seems to be a confluence between great geopolitical upheaval and natural disasters. So I've noticed this before, that we get tremendous disasters at time of like a world war, for instance, or a civil war as well. So this happened in the Civil War. Now, the Civil War wasn't raging in California, so to speak, but at the same time, consciousness affects our reality. So I can't help but wonder about this. Just incredible, really, to think about it. California's 30 days of rain in December 1861, January 1862, was the equivalent of at least a 30,000-year flood event, but this happens here much more often.
Yes, it does. And here it is. I'm still kind of flabbergasted at all of this, that it's not more widely known, or they don't compare it to more recent storms.
Yeah, as we said, people go to California, they think, well, I have to put up with an earthquake or two, or many dozen, or hundreds, or thousands, really, if you're talking about the little shakes. But to think of such an inundation sweeping everything away and burying, the capital under feet of water. Yeah, that's something I don't think most people really think about. Yet it did happen, and it is a historical documented event. And again, about 160 years ago. And then we've talked about, too, the fact that there's maps that show it in this state for a prolonged period of time, from the 1500s as well, and Native Americans have legends of this as well. So it really makes you wonder what is coming next. And I mean, if they have, that ARKSTORM scenario played out, they know. And as I've said, that atmospheric river has been just flooding in from time to time. So will it turn on and stay on for another 30-day period?
I know. They're saying that it's just not a matter of if, it's when.
So the biblical flood that will drown California, the Great Flood of 1861-1862, was a preview of what scientists expect to see again, and soon. And so this gets into a young scientist in 1860 from upstate New York named William Brewer that disembarked in San Francisco after a long journey. It took him from New York City through Panama and then north along the Pacific coast. The weather is perfectly heavenly, he said in a letter to his brother back east. And we have a fast-growing metropolis here, and so many different charms, magnificent buildings, many flowers we only see in house cultivations up in the Northeast. but soon all to be washed away.
I know, it's so sad.
But it does come back. So, I mean, that's the thing. The earth rebounds and we rebound. The difference is there's a lot of people in that Central Valley now.
Yeah.
A ton. And, as well as the flooding we've seen going on in other areas down in Southern California as well. Do you know that flood affected even Yuma, Arizona was underwater? Yuma, Arizona.
Yeah, I mean, it was far-reaching.
And by the way, Yuma, Arizona is one of the areas where so much of the winter lettuce comes from.
Yeah.
It's one of the top 2 producing areas. The other's in California. So, you redo something along those lines. If we have another event like that, talk about catastrophic for the food supply, because California is it's golden when it comes to the food supply and producing food of all types.
It is.
So welcome to Pahrump.
Oh, yay.
Yay.
We're back.
We're back, yes. And by the way, Art Bell, lived in Pahrump. That was the high desert that he used to speak from. And then, being in Pahrump, that always clicked with me, thinking, oh my God, I'm here where Art Bell was. Yep. As I always loved Art Bell and Coast to Coast Radio. But every time we do our shopping there and I come around the bend leading out of town, I'd have a vision of it being just an inland sea. And I would share that with Cindy almost every time, saying I could see the inland sea.
Well, yeah, and to add to that picture, looking into it, you can see the heat waves when you're looking over the desert. So it really gives that double whammy of, yeah, there was water there, and oh my gosh, it still looks like it's there.
And as we've said, we've found coral there. We found, clam shells, sponges. And, that means that, that's stuff from the ocean. So that's more than just flooding it up with fresh water. Somehow the ocean was making its way all the way up in there. And, I would buy that it might have been 160 to, 400 years. I don't buy thousands of years. There's no way. Because these things didn't look that old. I mean, it didn't look that old at all.
Yep, they were right there, right on top of the sand.
And, this is what North America looked like at one time. Scientists will tell you that. And we could see Florida was gone, portion of most of Georgia gone, South Carolina, half, 2/3 gone. And, I think a lot of the Earth Changes maps draw on what happened in the past. Could be people are seeing into the past as well as looking forward into the future.
It could be, yes.
And so we see so much of the central part of the U.S. was flooded over. Where's Nebraska there? Where's Kansas there? Same thing with Oklahoma and so much of Texas, just about all gone, really. And we look forward to what Cayce wrote, and you see the Great Canadian Shield very, very stable up through, northern Wisconsin and Michigan, as well as going into Canada. But there'd be heavy quakes and movements throughout the continent, and you see over here in Nevada, Utah, and Arizona, all this is drifting downwards. He thought that the west of the fault, as far as the San Andreas, is going to stay stable, and this is going to move downwards. And, some have even said at some point in time, LA might be farther north than San Francisco.
Yes, could be.
Now, the central area rises slightly, according to Cayce, as you see there. So this is all going to become a higher plateau area. But he did have the Great Lakes draining into the Gulf of Mexico, as we've talked about. But if you do look at his map, Louisiana is not gone in his map. Mississippi is not gone, and same thing with Arkansas. It's just that it does widen. I want to say he said, I forget how much he said it widened.
It's a mile.
Yeah. Much wider than it is now. And then when we crossed over it, we saw tremendous flooding. When we crossed over it, it was pretty intense. So accepting stable areas, the entire east coast of the U.S. sinks slightly. And, this is one of the reasons why Cindy's like, I'll go with you anywhere you want to go. But when we start getting east of the Mississippi, I get nauseous.
Well, I do. My body just is physically, I can't help it. I'll still go be with my husband anywhere. But my goodness, I don't want to be there and be nauseous.
Yeah, because in regular times I'd still prefer to be back in Sarasota, honestly, just because of the community, the weather, the sunshine, everything. Although then you have to think about too. I mean, we don't want to be in any populated areas. So, um, with the FIVEG that's so abundant, as much as I loved Sarasota, and then I moved to Nokomis, where I did sleep better in Nokomis than I didn't. I couldn't sleep in Sarasota, even though I love to be there during the day when I'm awake. I couldn't sleep there at night. It's just too much buzz, and there's too much of those towers everywhere. He did say Florida stays still. He said Atlanta, Georgia, is going to end up being a seaport. Atlanta's actually a little bit higher than that proportionately up there. Charleston Bay, underwater, actually all the way up past Columbia. And there's evidence that there was a beach, basically, give or take, around Columbia, South Carolina.
Yeah, as I'm looking at it, I'm just sitting here getting dizzy.
Yeah. So one of the things that hit me when I was talking to Cindy about this, if this is all sinking kind of over here, it could be because, the New Madrid may go, which will trigger the fault that's here around Charleston, which Charleston's my favorite city overall. I think it's gorgeous. I love the history and the vibe. But again, 1880s, you had a major 7 point something quake, liquefied the whole area. So maybe, that will go after the New Madrid goes, and creating kind of a crustal sinking over in this area, because he does say that, basically the entire East Coast sinks slightly. Besides this safe zone, which, as you see here, it extends all the way over into Mississippi. It goes through the northern half of Alabama, Georgia, northern part. I've always felt this part of Georgia was really good, actually. When you're over in this area where the confluence of Tennessee and North Carolina, this always felt like a very solid, stable area. But then you got to dodge the nuclear reactors and hoping that nothing's affected, because there's so many of them in the East Coast. And then the Appalachian area in North Carolina, which is why from Florida I headed straight there. Virginia, even Virginia Beach will be okay, he said, and that's where the ARE Foundation is. Even the Outer Banks, a portion of the Outer Banks anyway. So you could see, and southern West Virginia, and the southeastern part of Kentucky is all good. And, our brother David Dubine is in the safe zone, as well as our brother Raven and so many others. Elena Saucier. Miss Nicole's got to go a little bit farther south to be in the safe zone. So it's interesting to look at his map and what he had drawn with everything that's happening right now. Nevada, once we have Pele, Etna, and Vesuvius, that action concurrent, then he says it won't be long, just a matter of months before, the water rushes all the way into Nevada and into Utah.
Yeah, and the only problem with foreseeing these events is there is really no way to put a timeline on it. All you can see is the event coming into focus. It's so difficult. You can't say, oh, it's really Christmas time, or, I mean, maybe seasonally you can, but there's no way to put any dates on it.
There isn't. And so, again, where are you going to go? Every area is going to have its issues. Every area is going to have its issues. Us personal, as we've said, we've liked to stick around this area, but then they frack so much of southern Colorado and northern New Mexico. There's water purity issues all throughout Navajo and Hopi land, which is really, really sad. I don't feel good about really northwestern or really the entire western side of Utah. Just instinctively, and Nevada made my stomach sick. And in reality, even though we were there, we were just staying there to be close to family, and listening to the guides on when it was time to go and it was time to move on.
Yep, definitely.
Arizona's got some good spots, but you will feel shaking. I think you are going to feel shaking. And Yuma's down in here, and we could see how the San Andreas, goes. And then there's the whole Walker Lane scenario, which is not the San Andreas necessarily going, but it fracturing up in here higher, which will definitely cause an inland sea all the way up through Nevada as well. So, there's a lot of thought. I really feel pretty good about northwest Arkansas, southwestern Missouri. As we had talked about, we saw one house that we weren't really thinking about that area. It was right about here in Missouri, and it was gorgeous. And it's like, wow, that's like half the price it should be. Beautiful log cabin. So cheap. And it turns out this whole area was massively flooded before. So, again, and that's where I think there's going to be massive flooding as well along eastern Arkansas. And I know there's a girl that does homesteading. One of our people from Florida is constantly telling me to go seek out her. I think her name's Erin. She does homesteading somewhere over in this area. But, I strongly feel that's going to be flooded. I don't think it's going to be great right in close to the Mississippi. Because if we look at even just, bringing up Google Earth, you can see, where the floods were in the past.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you sure can.
And it's not hard to see it, and it does extend in quite a bit. So there are going to be little patches that are going to be really golden spots, but everybody's going to have your own issues.
Right. It just looked like a big wash on Google Earth.
Yeah, and I'll show you that with the beginning of the next video. So guys, thank you for your support on Ko-Fi and Patreon. Make sure you are subscribed. If you need to reach us, it's EEARTS at ProtonMail or evolutionaryenergyarts@gmail.com. And, as always, may you guys be blessed with abundant peace, love, health, happiness, and wellness. May you always be guided from above as to where to go, where to plant your roots, and what to do next. And Cindy's going to give us a little tune.
Thank you. God bless. Namaste.
God bless and namaste.